Hello folks and welcome to that screencast. Danny here. In today's video I'm going to be comparing the iPad mini to the Nexus 7. Now I've had the iPad mini for a few weeks now and been using it quite a lot, so I've got to know it really well. And before that I've had the Nexus 7 pretty much from launch and know that device really well. So I thought I'd do basically a comparison video comparing these two devices. So if you're maybe looking to get a tablet for Christmas or something like that and you're wondering which one to maybe get, then maybe this video will help you. So in this video I'm not just going to be comparing the specs, this is going to be more about how they perform as tablets in general, which gives the overall better experience. Now, I'm going to say off the bat now, this isn't going to be a winner in this video because each tablet has its strengths and weaknesses and it just really depends on what you're looking for. So off the bat I will say the Nexus 7, it's got that price point, that's kind of its biggest strength, is actually the price point. For £159 you're getting a 16GB tablet which has got a quad-core processor and just a great overall tablet experience. With the iPad mini you're getting obviously that great build quality, what you expect from Apple, and also that great ecosystem with all the apps and things like that. So both tablets definitely have the strengths. So first of all, let's talk about the iPad mini in terms of hardware. And I've got to say, on first getting this device and actually holding it, I was really impressed with how light it is and how thin the device is overall. Now, a tablet is quite a tactile thing, it's something you obviously use with your hands, so the actual form factor is really important, and having a really slim device is definitely something I really like about the iPad mini. Now, it's got great build quality as you would expect, so when you hold it, it doesn't like creak or anything like that. You can see it's really well made, and it's definitely very nice in the touch. Now moving on to the Nexus 7, obviously this is a cheaper tablet, so it's not quite got that premium feel about it, but to be honest, for £159 I've been super impressed with the overall build quality of the Nexus 7. It's got more of a rubber texture to the back, so it does offer quite good grip, which I really liked. Now one thing I would say is it is a little bit thicker than the iPad mini, but to be honest that hasn't been a major issue, and in terms of actually how much it pretty much weighs the same in my opinion. Now the Nexus 7 is not quite as tall as the iPad, but to be honest it's not really noticeable because they are very similar in terms of height, but the iPad mini is definitely quite a bit wider than the Nexus 7. Now in terms of holding these devices, the Nexus 7 you can obviously hold it in one hand and it's really easy, it's just probably like holding a smartphone almost, it's not that big. The iPad mini being a little bit wider, it's a little bit harder to hold in one hand. Now I've got average sized hands and find this to be pretty much easy to hold the iPad mini in one hand, but maybe if you've got smaller hands you may find it harder to grip in one hand like this. But to be honest, when I've actually used the device I've mostly just gripped it like this, in this sort of position with one hand. And when I first got the device I was a little bit worried, if I hold it like this will I actually keep touching the screen and kind of mess things up, but in fact I find that the software is really intelligent and holding it like this is not a major problem, and you can use the device holding it in this position, which I find really comfortable. So in general I think in terms of holding these devices and using them, it's very close, there's no difference in my opinion really, and I find that both devices are perfect as one-handed devices. So I'll talk about the actual screens later in this video because that is a big talking point, but next up I want to actually talk about the speakers. Now on the iPad mini the speakers are positioned at the bottom of the device on the side, and you've got two stereo speakers there. Now because they're so close together it's not really that stereo experience you get in there, it's more like a mono experience, but maybe because it's got two speakers you are getting quite good volume there, which I was really impressed with. Now kind of a negative I've got with the iPad is because they're on the sides, when you're holding the device you're kind of almost covering the speakers up with your hand, so that's something you've got to kind of watch for when you're holding the iPad. But generally I've been really impressed with the actual volume of the iPad mini. Next up we have the Nexus 7, and the speaker is actually on the back towards the bottom. Now because it's actually on the back of the device you're a little less prone to actually covering it up with your hand, which is nice, but because it's just a mono speaker I found the actual audio quality has been okay, but it's not quite as loud as the iPad mini, so you do feel when you may be watching YouTube videos and things like that you prefer the actual audio to be a little bit louder. And I've actually found that I actually use my headphones a lot more with the Nexus 7, and with the iPad mini I found the speakers were more than adequate, so I was using my headphones a lot less there. So next up I want to actually talk about the screens and go into quite a lot of detail in this. Now I want to talk more about the actual screen sizes and the aspect ratio of these two screens. I think that's where the biggest difference lies other than the software. But just quickly talking about the resolution, the Nexus 7 has 216 pixels per inch and the iPad mini has 163 pixels per inch. So there's definitely quite a bit of difference there, but it's not like night and day difference. It's really, to be honest, a lot of people probably won't even notice the difference. But if you're someone like me who's a little bit more kind of technology savvy I should say, then definitely I can notice the difference when I do put these devices side by side. Though it hasn't really hindered the iPad mini in terms of its overall experience, I find it still a great device. Now in terms of maybe reading books and looking at text, the Nexus 7, the text is just a little bit sharper, so in terms of reading books, you could argue the Nexus 7 is a little bit better device in terms of reading a lot of text. But to be honest, it's not that much of a difference, but definitely the Nexus 7 beats the iPad mini on resolution. So next up I want to actually talk about the screen sizes. This is probably the biggest physical difference between these two devices. We've got the Nexus 7, which is, I think it's 16:9 aspect ratio, and it's more of a widescreen device. So when you're watching movies or YouTube, the video almost fills the screen completely. You do get a little bit of a black bar top and bottom on most things you watch, but only a very thin black bar. So it's generally almost full screen when you watch a video, which a lot of people like, especially if you watch a lot of videos. Whereas for the iPad mini, it's got that 4:3 aspect ratio, so it's a bit more like a square, is the best way to describe it. So when you're watching YouTube videos or maybe movies, you'll get the video obviously in the middle, and you do get quite thick black bars top and bottom. Some people find that a bit annoying having the black bars, but I think once you've had the device for a few days, you get used to it pretty quick, and it's not a major issue. But I know some people do get annoyed with actually the big black bars. Now, I understand why Apple have gone for this screen size. I'm going to show you a couple of clips now why I think Apple actually went for this size screen, and why I actually think it's better over a true widescreen. So I've got a video playing here both on the Nexus 7 and on the iPad mini, and as you can see here, on the Nexus 7 the video almost takes up the full screen. You've just got a little black bar top and bottom, whereas on the iPad mini, as you can see here, the black bar is quite large, which some people do find annoying. Now I think on the black iPad mini it's less noticeable than over the white iPad mini. Now I think after you've had the device for a few days you kind of forget about that and it's not a major issue. But if you actually compare the two videos, you actually notice that the iPad's video is a little bit bigger than over the Nexus 7. So that's something to take into account. Now, reason I think Apple have gone for this screen size is not because it suits video better, because obviously it doesn't, as we've proven there, but where it does actually turn out to be a better experience in my opinion is when you come to web browsing. So as you can see here, I've got both tablets in landscape, and as you can see here, when you're actually viewing the web, you actually can see more of the web at once on the iPad screen, with it being obviously wider than you can on the Nexus 7. So when you're using the Nexus 7, you do feel you have to do a lot more scrolling when you want to see obviously the bottom of the page or lower down. Whereas on the iPad mini, you don't need to scroll quite as much, and you are getting a lot more of the website on screen at once, which I really like. Now when I move these devices into portrait, you'll notice now we can see more of the web page on the Nexus 7 than we can on the iPad mini. But to be fair to the iPad mini, we can still see enough of the web page for it to be a good viewing experience. But more importantly, if you actually look at the Nexus 7, the website looks really small. It's quite hard to see the images and text clearly. So you do feel you need to actually zoom in a lot using the Nexus 7 in portrait. Whereas on the iPad mini, you could actually use it just like this to view the web without any real needing to zoom in. So in my opinion, overall, I do feel the web browsing experience is better on the iPad mini by quite a margin when I've actually used these devices. Also, when I start comparing other applications like something like the Calendar app, for example, I find that it's overall a better experience on the iPad mini due to this screen size than it is over the Nexus 7. So overall, I think the iPad is a lot better web experience, as I said, due to the screen size, but also when it comes to using other applications, I do think this 4:3 screen size is more suited for most applications from my experience. Now this is obviously a personal thing, but using both devices for a lengthy period of time, I can understand why Apple have gone for this unusual screen size and not gone for the normal widescreen. Because at the end of the day, these tablets are not just made for viewing video, they're also there as a productive tool, also reading magazines, reading websites and so on. So I really do think this screen size overall is better in my opinion. So finally, I just want to quickly finish on the software. Probably the biggest difference between these two tablets is actually the software. Obviously the Nexus 7 runs Android, which some people like because it's customization, it's widgets and so on. It's a really powerful operating system, and I've been really impressed with Jelly Bean on the Nexus 7. Now we've got iOS on the iPad, and that's more a minimal kind of operating system, a little bit more simpler looking and easier to use maybe, but generally both operating systems are very good, and you're really splitting hairs which one is the better one, in my opinion. It's all down to like personal taste. But where I do think the iPad excels over the Nexus 7, and that's actually on applications. You'll find with the Nexus 7 that all the applications are pretty much mobile phone applications, which are just scaled up to fit the Nexus 7 screen. They don't look like bad, but they just don't take real use of the real estate of the tablet screen, in my opinion. Whereas on the iPad, all the applications just about are all designed for the tablet in mind and the tablet screen. So here on the screen we've got a few images of the Twitter application, for example, and you'll see in portrait mode the screen looks fine on the Nexus 7, the application looks fine, it just looks pretty much like the iPad version. But when you do turn these devices into landscape, you can see that the Nexus 7 Twitter client just looks like a stretched version of the application, or a stretched version of the mobile phone application, whereas on the actual iPad you can see that the application has actually been redesigned just for the tablet. Now this is pretty much the same on all applications from my experience, and in general I find that applications on the iPad are more suited to a tablet, and on the Nexus 7 you're really just getting the mobile phone applications, like I said, which are just scaled up, and to be honest they don't really take great advantage of the real estate of the screen, and kind of do just look like mobile phone applications. Now they do still have obviously the functionality there, but they just don't look as nice. Now I also feel just the actual catalogue of applications on the iPad is a lot bigger than on the Nexus 7, and generally you're going to get a lot better quality applications and a lot more powerful applications overall, and that's not even including games, where I think you get a bigger choice of games on the iPad as well. So in terms of actual applications, definitely the iPad is far more superior than over the Nexus 7. So I'm going to leave the video there. I think I've gone on quite a lot in this video, but hopefully I've pointed out some of the biggest differences between these two tablets. And like I said at the beginning of the video, it just depends what you're looking for in terms of a tablet. If you're more conscious about the cost of the tablet, or you prefer the Android experience, obviously the Nexus 7 is going to be the tablet for you. And with the iPad, I think you are getting overall a better web experience, you're getting better build quality, and you're obviously getting that great ecosystem, great applications and great software. So I'm going to leave the video there. Hopefully it's been useful to some of you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.